into public session. And just to say to our guests, we'll now go into public session, and just to say to our guests that they should switch their mobile phones off completely, or put it on safe or airplane or flight mode, or otherwise they will interfere with the broadcasting equipment. So first, I also want to read your note of privilege. I wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence to this committee. However, if you're directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you're entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You're directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you're asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise nor make charges against any persons or entity by name or in such a way as to make him or her or it identifiable. The opening statement submitted to the committee will be published. Your opening statements to the committee will be published on the committee website after this meeting, and members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the House or an official either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable. And I suppose, just to give an introduction, the purpose of this meeting is to look at the role of special needs assistants, and it's very specific. So obviously, while there might be broader issues to do with special needs assistants, the purpose of this meeting is specifically to look at the role of special needs assistants. And last year, Senator Mary Moran took on the task of preparing a report as rapporteur for the committee on the issue of the role of special needs assistants. And since then, Senator Moran has done considerable work on this matter, including consulting with a range of stakeholders. And I know that written submissions were received and collated and so on. And we had previous meetings as well, which will inform this report as well. And today we have an opportunity to engage directly with a group of key stakeholders to enable the report to move towards conclusion. And in that regard, I would like to welcome from the National Parents Council Primary, Ms Anya Lynch, from the Trade Union Impact, Mr Desi Robinson and Ms Joan McCrohan. From the National Council for Special Education, Ms Teresa Griffin and Mr Niall Feeney, and from the Department of Education and Skills, Mr Jim Mulcairns. And to get proceedings underway, I now invite Ms Anya Lynch to make the presentation on behalf of the National Parents Council Primary.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity. The role of the SNA is clearly defined in the Department of Education Circular 30/2014. Under the terms of the circular, the MPC considers that the Special Needs Assistance Scheme is effective in meeting the needs of children who have specific care needs. It supports children who have care needs that could not ordinarily be fully met by the teacher to access school placement. MPC believes that the SNA scheme has contributed significantly to the enhancement of students' experiences in school. Notwithstanding this, however, MPC believes that the role of the SNA in the school needs to be more closely observed. Despite the clarity provided by the recent circular, parents continue to report that SNAs often engage in extended functions outside of those provided for. MPC agrees with the report, that the Value for Money report, that the weight of educational research considers that the delegation of educational instruction to support staff is inappropriate and would represent an unacceptable departure from the role. Children with special education needs require the most specialised and skilled professionals to support them to access the curriculum. Whilst in the main, MPC believes that the SNA entry requirements are appropriate for the role as set out in Circular 30/2014, it is the view of the MPC that they are not appropriate for the extended functions that they may be currently engaging in. In addition to the extended functions that SNAs may be currently engaging in, MPC also believes that certain aspects of the role of the SNA, as defined in the circular, needs further consideration in relation to the SNA's suitability to carry out their functions. Specifically, MPC refers to Section 7, SNA support for pupils with behaviour-related care needs. The circular states, the care role of the SNA in instances where SNA support is sanctioned to assist with behavioural-related care needs is concerned with assisting the teacher to meet the care needs of the child by preserving the safety of the pupil and others with whom the pupil is in contact, assisting to ensure the prevention of self-injurious or destructive behaviour, reinforcing good behaviour on the child's part and acting as a positive role model for the child, and assisting with recording data in relation to pupil behaviour and behavioural development. MPC believes that the skill and training required for the first two bullet points, in particular, of the SNA's role in relation to a child's behaviour-related care needs are significant and would require specific training. We believe that as is the case for the SNA support for children with visual and hearing impairments, that schools which require SNAs to work with children with behaviour-related care needs must ensure that they are equipped with the skills necessary to support the particular needs of these children. MPC believes that the allocation of SNA support should be clearly linked to an individualised care plan which has been prepared for the child, and this is now clearly set out in Circular 30/2014. This plan should be prepared in consultation with the parents of the child concerned, the child where possible, and everyone who works with the child in the school and other environments. The plan would clearly define the care needs of the child and how these needs would be met, whilst ensuring that at all times the focus is maintained on the development of a child's independent skills. The aim should be that as the child becomes more independent, the need for SNA support reduces. The plan should reflect this, and proactive steps should be taken to reach this goal. This aim, along with all other aims, should be communicated clearly to parents and the child. The level of need should be monitored regularly. MPC is concerned that an over-dependence on SNA support can lead to social isolation of children, as the presence of an adult can create a barrier and so make normal interaction more difficult. We would suggest that other types of support, including peer support, be examined further at school level. There is some evidence to suggest that peer support can have a positive impact on students' behaviour and can lead to reduction in the need for SNA support. MPC believes that there should be an accredited compulsory basic training course for all SNAs. SNA are often supporting the most vulnerable children within the school, and basic training regarding understanding children's needs, communication skills and basic child protection knowledge should be included in a short initial training course. The mere fact that the SNA is working under the supervision and guidance of the classroom teacher will not ensure that they are able to effectively carry out their duties. MPC believes that parents should have support and information about the different resources available for their child in the education system and the function of each support. Parents often get caught in a fight for any resource rather than a fight for the right resource due to lack of information on their child's needs and how these needs should effectively be met. In conclusion, MPC believes that special needs assistants are effective in supporting children with specific care needs to access mainstream schools. We are concerned that their remit has been extended beyond this to include an educational role. We believe that the best educational outcomes and overall experience of school for children with SEN should be achieved by children who have their identified needs met by appropriate professionals. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sonia, and you kept very good time there as well. Our next speaker is Desi Robinson on behalf of Impact, and I just want to say, Desi, because I was having a look at your presentation there will be a lot of issues that wouldn't really be the subject matter of this meeting. I understand why you had them in your presentation, and I'm not asking you not to refer to them. It's just that when we get to the questions, it will be very much around the role of the SNA, just to emphasise that. All right.
Chair, thank you. Just Chair, members of the committee, I would like to begin by thanking the committee for once again inviting Impact to present to you and affording us the important opportunity to outline in a direct fashion to the members of the committee the up-to-date position regarding special needs assistants and the situation they face and our own concerns regarding this. At the outset, I would like to advise the members of the committee that Impact continues to invest in the education sector. It's the fastest growing area within the Union. Since we established a dedicated education division 3 years ago, we have had two very successful biennial divisional conferences. We see the education division as providing a voice for all those staff who work in the education system, other than teachers and academics, who are already well represented by our teaching colleagues, our teaching union colleagues. In truth, the workers we organise and represent are more often forgotten and neglected, but are crucial to the successful operation of our schools and colleges and to the outcomes that are achieved. Of course, a large portion of our divisional membership is comprised of special needs assistants. The expansion in the number of special needs assistants was a key element in the process of making mainstream schooling a reality for many of our citizens. The commitments contain a different piece of legislation enacted in the late 90s and early 90s were dependent on the provision of adequate care and teaching resources. Members of the committee will be very mindful of the population growth experienced in this country for several years now. This has manifested itself in a sustained increase in the number of school-going children. When the financial, economic and fiscal crisis struck, one of the consequences of the government's decision was to cap the overall number of special needs assistants. The cap remained in place for 4 years, despite the conditions that would suggest the existence of a significant additional demand. that is the increase of the school-going population. The current Minister deserves credit for securing additional posts as announced last year. This followed an increase of 390 posts announced by her predecessor in the previous budget. However, these increases did not make up for the lost ground during the period of 2009 to 12, particularly when you take into account the relentless growth in this cohort of population. It is vitally important that members of the committee understand that the employment situation of special needs assistants is markedly different to that of a vast majority of other public servants. Originally, the special needs assistants were linked directly to a particular child. Hence, the association in the mind of the parents and the children with special education needs themselves with it's his, her or my SNA. In recent times, the policy has changed to one of access to SNA rather than an additional SNA assigned to each child. The effect of this is that the school receives a particular allocation, but this is required to spread over all the children with access needs. The original connection between the special needs assistants and a particular child meant that when a child progressed or left the school for some other reason, the SNA faced redundancy. In fact, a specific redundancy scheme exists for SNAs. Unlike most other public servants, special needs assistants do not enjoy the relative security of employment. This placed special needs assistants in a rather unusual position in the context of the recent public service agreement. As the committee members will know, these arrangements were based on a commitment to flexibility and cooperation with change, on the one hand, in return for job security and no reductions in income, on the other. As SNAs do not enjoy job security in the first place, the bargain was somewhat meaningless for them. As a result of Impact's representation, we secured the introduction of a supplementary assignment panel in 2013. Where an SNA is facing redundancy, this provides for the possibility of alternative employment as schools that have posts to fill are required to interview a selected redundant SNA in the first instance. This was a welcome development and the scheme was further improved in 2014. Nonetheless, special needs assistants do not enjoy what would be regarded as a normal public service security of tenure. The big issue that preoccupies special needs assistants since Impact was last before the committee is that fragmentation of posts and casualisation of employment. When I was last here, I outlined some of the effects of the trends to the fragment posts when the National Council for Special Education was making its allocation. This became even a greater problem in 2014-15. In several cases, our members working as special needs assistants had their hours cut, and obviously this also meant an associated reduction in income. As this violated the other key commitments on the part of the government in the public service agreement, namely.
But we get some relevance, from the Speaker. I don't think this is really what this meeting is about with respect. And I would ask, with respect, if the contributor would focus on.
I suppose, Deputy and Vice Chair, there is only a short amount of speech to go, so I made that point at the beginning, but I'm just going to let it be read. I understood the Chair did tell me that to continue with the submission. It would involve such a major change. I just feel if Tassie gives the speech, but I've emphasised in the debate. I accept your point. But when we get to the debate, I'll concentrate very much on the role in a very large. Sorry, continue. In a very large poll, we received an endorsement of action by a margin of almost 97%. In fairness to the current Minister, she has listened carefully to our concerns and to our representation, appearing to display a good understanding of the difficulties. We are heartened by our remarks on the 9th of April 2013 at our Education Divisional Conference, and we responded to our invitation to participate in talks with other stakeholders. These talks led to the Department's issuing a circular on the 12th of June 2015, the terms of which place an onus on the school to offer additional hours in the first instance to part-time working in the school. We see this as a very positive and welcome development. Unfortunately, the announcement of the NCSE allocation for the next school year has been delayed. Normally, these allocations are announced in mid-June. This allows for the schools and individual SNAs to plan in the knowledge of what jobs will exist in the school for the following year. I regret to say that our members have commenced school holidays in recent days without
the job situation, for the end of August or early September. They don't know their situation. This is absolutely totally unacceptable. Something the Department of Education has acknowledged. A secondary effect that it makes it difficult to be definitive about the benefits of curing the recent circular on casualisation of employment. It is imperative that the allocation figures become available in order to allow its provision to operate effectively. Nothing less will be acceptable to Impact. As you can see, Impact has fought hard on behalf of special needs assistants just to secure progress on related issues of job security and income protection. They are at the heart of the public sector agreement. Since the Croke Park Agreement was negotiated in 2010, this should not be necessary. It's our view it would be preferable that SNAs were treated similarly to teachers, enjoying continuous employment depending on the school-going numbers. As I previously stated previously here, a big issue for special needs assistants is respect or perceived lack of it. There is a significant spend on the scheme under which special needs assistants are employed. We need to move to a situation where resources that is comprised of SNA population is properly respected and valued. Too often, special needs assistants are seen as the general dog's body, rather than important assets to the classroom. Whether it's because their employment is seen as casual or for some other reason, there is no continuous professional development or in-service training programme for special needs assistants. This must be created if we were to maximise the return on what the state is investing. It's also vitally important that specific training models are made available to SNAs so that SNAs can better meet the needs of children with particular requirements. It seems to us that it would be timely to have a review that would encompass all of these issues and others in order to ensure that children who rely on the availability of special needs assistance will have their needs met in the best possible way. If there is a genuine openness on the Department and other authorities to approach this in a truly collaborative fashion, then Impact in its representational role will be happy to participate. Thank you.
Thanks, Desi. The next speaker is Teresa Griffin, who's making a presentation on behalf of the National Council for Special Education.
Thank you for your invitation to attend here this afternoon. I wish to introduce my colleague, Niall Feeney, who's an Assistant Principal within the NCSE. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to further contribute to your discussions on the role of the SNA and to provide an update since we last met in October 2013. As advised previously, the NCC is a very strong supporter of the SNA scheme. Without SNA support, many students would be unable to attend school. The scheme provides for sufficient support to meet a child's or a student's care needs, but it also allows for this support to be faded over time in line with the student's development. The scheme also facilitates maintained or increased levels of support where this is needed. The NCSE initially allocated 10,985 SNA posts to schools for last September, the start of the current school year. Since then, we've allocated over 165 posts in response to needs which emerged during the year. So there are now some 11,150 SNA posts in schools, and more than two-thirds of these are in mainstream class settings. Members might recall that at the last meeting I outlined that the role of the SNA had been informally expanded by some schools to include an educational remit. Some parents, schools and professionals consider that the SNA is allocated to help with literacy difficulties or to provide therapeutic support such as speech and language therapy. Often, when SNA care support is being faded or withdrawn completely, a school might advise that they'd like the SNA to do other work with a student, such as working on improving a student's language, literacy, numeracy, and so on. And in the 14-15 school year, we processed 8,500 applications for SNA support. And of these, 3,000, or 35%, didn't come in within the remit of the SNA scheme for reasons as I've stated above. We find in the NCC, we find this to be very worrying because every application for SNA support raises expectations and hopes, and when the applications are declined, there can be disappointment, anxiety, and sometimes even anger. and a belief that the NCC is not doing its job properly or that cuts are the reason for the non-allocation. And this isn't the case. In fact, the number of SNAs has increased by over 600 since 2013. And I know one of the issues that are being discussed is should we have teaching assistants? And from time to time there is that suggestion that the role of the SNA should be expanded to include the provision of additional educational support to students with special educational needs. And as a general rule, the NCSE considers the issue of whether or not to have teaching assistants is much broader than special education. But the conclusions of the research I referenced at our last meeting on the matter still remain relevant. The research studies that I raised, and I have circulated again for your convenience, they raise serious concerns about the effectiveness of teaching assistant support for students with special educational needs. While finding some positive effects on teachers' workload and stress levels, these studies find that the more support students received from teaching assistants, the less progress they actually made in subjects such as English, maths and science. That students with special educational needs spent over a quarter of their time away from mainstream class, their teachers and peers. That they were almost constantly accompanied by a teacher assistant who bore the greatest responsibility for planning and teaching them. That students could become overly dependent on teacher assistant support and socially isolated from other students. And despite the really good intentions of teaching assistants, students with special education received a less appropriate and lower quality educational experience than other students. And I think all of us are striving to ensure that Irish students who have special educational needs do not receive a less appropriate or lower quality educational experience. One US study noted that the substantial increase in teacher assistant use in US schools had taken place without any compelling evidence that it is, and I quote, educationally sound to deploy the least qualified personnel to provide primary instruction to students with the most complex learning characteristics. But on the other hand, research findings consistently demonstrate a strong relationship between the quality of teaching and the role of the teacher and outcomes achieved by this group of students. And as I said, I recirculated some of the extracts from the various research literature for your information. The NCSC provided policy advice to the Minister, which takes on board the research findings and international best practice principles. The NCSC considers that there is insufficient evidence at this point in time to support the introduction of a new teacher assistant grade to work specifically with students who have special educational needs. The research findings indicate that paraprofessionals can act as a barrier to a student's access to the teacher and full participation in classroom activities, and it is the quality of teaching which determines better educational outcomes. So to conclude, while there's a very important role for the SNA, and again I reiterate the NCSE is a very strong supporter of the SNA scheme in supporting the care needs of students. The NCSE believes that students with complex learning needs should be taught by fully qualified and experienced teachers, equipped with the necessary skills to meet those needs. In our 2013 policy advice supporting students with special educational needs, the NCSE recognised the importance and centrality of the teacher in the education and care of all students, including students with special educational needs. And research findings consistently indicate the quality of teachers and their teaching are the most important factors in determining educational outcomes for students with special needs. And just to conclude, the NCSE is very concerned that parents sometimes are unsure about the SNA scheme or unsure how the educational system supports children with special educational needs. So we have been over the last while producing leaflets for parents, such as these, information for parents, guardians of children, say, and this one it's for young people with a disability. But we have literally just printed information, parents for guardians of children and young people with special educational needs. And I'm going to leave some copies with the chair. Okay, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, Teresa. Okay, so the next speaker is Mr. Jim Mulcairns to make the presentation on behalf of the department.
Thank you, Chairperson and members of the Joint Committee for the invitation to attend the meeting of the committee and to brief members on the role of special needs assistants. SNAs play an important role in assisting schools to support students with significant care needs, and since the scheme was first introduced have substantially assisted the process of including students with special educational needs in schools. The Department of Education and Skills recognises that all children require care and attention in school. This is particularly true in relation to younger children and infants. All schools therefore have a responsibility to provide for the care and well-being of all of the pupils who attend their schools, including children with special educational needs. The Department also recognises that there will be a significant number of children who, by virtue of their disability, will require additional care and attention. For these children, the SNA scheme is provided by the Department to assist recognised primary, post-primary and special schools to cater for their care needs in an educational context. The Special Needs Assistance Scheme is designed to provide schools with the additional adult support staff who can assist children with special educational needs who also have additional and significant care needs. This support is provided in order to facilitate the attendance of those pupils at school and also to minimise disruption to class or teacher time for the pupils concerned or for their peers, and with a view to developing their independent living skills. The scheme has been a key factor in ensuring the successful inclusion of children with special educational needs into mainstream education, and also with providing care support to pupils who are enrolled in special schools and special classes. In recent years, the scheme has been reviewed on 2 occasions. In 2011, the Department published a comprehensive value for money and policy review, which was referenced by Anya a little bit earlier. And in June 2013, the National Council for Special Education published its report on supporting students with special educational needs, which was referenced by Teresa there a moment ago. In the preparation of these reports, the NCSE and the review group engaged in significant consultations with stakeholders, including schools, parents, pupils, management bodies and other interested parties, to ensure the broadest possible range of views and opinions were considered in the preparation of the reports. The Value for Money and Policy Review found that the SNA scheme, as was mentioned by Anya, is supporting schools in meeting the needs of students with disabilities who also have significant care needs, and that the scheme has assisted in enabling many students as possible to be included in mainstream. However, the review also found that the purpose of the scheme and the allocation process was generally not at the time well understood within schools or by parents, and that the deployment of SNAs in schools had, in practice, moved away from the objectives originally envisaged, which was essentially to provide for children's care needs, and had moved towards SNA involvement in behavioural, therapeutic, pedagogical or teaching, or administrative duties even. The review recommended that the criteria for the allocation of SNA support should be restated and clarified for both parents and schools. These findings were essentially echoed by the NCSE in its later report. However, the NCSE also made a number of additional findings, and indeed it did in a number of other reports as well, which I should point out, which the Department has considered and has now begun to implement. So, in the light of these recommendations, the Department published a comprehensive circular to give effect to a number of the recommendations made in the review reports and to provide clarity to parents and schools on the role and purpose of SNAs. The circular was published in 2014. I've circulated a copy of this to members, and many of you will be familiar with it. The circular provides clarification and guidance on the following matters. Obviously, on the role of the SNA, the description of the care needs for which SNA supports are commonly provided, the primary care tasks of SNAs, and indeed the secondary care tasks which may be assigned to SNAs from time to time, the role of the classroom teacher and the resource or learning support teachers, and the role of an SNA to support those teachers, the role of medical and other professional reports or recommendations made by medical or other professionals, the SNA for support which is allocated to pupils to deal with behaviour-related care needs, the SNA support for children with visual and hearing impairment, and indeed the NCSE allocations process and how that operates. In addition, the circular clarifies that SNAs are allocated to schools to manage as appropriate. It identifies the role of the school in managing the resource and ensuring access to the SNA by the child as necessary. The circular also provides that the SNA allocation should be reviewed on an annual basis, and that in the case of some allocations, they should be time-bound in the expectation that the care needs should diminish, particularly with the ongoing support provided by the SNA. It also introduces a requirement that personal pupil plans should be in place, which should include a care dimension. The pupil plan should indicate how the SNA will meet the needs of the child and the time frame for which this support is expected to be required. Transition to post-primary is considered to be a critical time for a student with special educational needs. The circular requires that a child's personal plan should recognise this, and that the focus of the plan should be on ensuring that the child's care needs are, insofar as possible, ameliorated before moving to post-primary. Of course, some pupils, particularly those with physical disabilities or conditions with enduring needs, will continue to have a requirement for some level of access to SNA support. And for some children, there may also be short-term care needs as they transition to post-primary schools. In a small number of cases, for pupils at a post-primary age, emerging conditions or needs may only manifest as the child or young adult gets older. However, for the most part, it should be expected that only students with chronic and serious care needs arising from a disability should continue to require SNA support in post-primary schools. Not all children who have special educational needs or who have been diagnosed as having a disability require access to SNA support. The allocation of additional adult SNA support should not generally be regarded as a prerequisite for a student with special educational needs to attend school. The purpose of the scheme is to provide for the significant additional care needs which some pupils with special education needs may have. At present, for example, some 42,000 children receive additional resource and learning support teaching, while over 24,000 receive additional access to SNA support. Accordingly, qualifying criteria for the allocation of SNA support include the following conditions. Firstly, a child must be enrolled in and attending a state-funded primary, post-primary or special school. There must be a professional report including an assessment indicating the child has a disability, and the care needs outlined in the assessment must be of such significance that they're beyond that which would normally be expected to be provided to a child by the child's class teacher, support teacher or other school teachers. In general, the care needs of qualifying children will fall into one of four categories, and they are medical needs, physical impairment, sensory impairment, or those who constitute a danger to themselves or others. Of course, the type of significant care needs that pupils may have can be varied, depending on the nature or level of disability or sensory impairment that a child may have. So while the list isn't exhaustive, the following are some examples of the primary care needs which would be considered significant, which might require SNA support because the extent of assistance required, if it was to be provided by the class teacher, would overly disrupt normal teaching time. So firstly, assistance with feeding or dressing themselves. So that would be where a child with special needs requires adult assistance with feeding or just changing their clothes. Assistance with toileting and general hygiene, including catheterisation. I suppose that would be a less frequent occurrence, and that's where a child with special needs can't independently self-toilet until such time as they're able to do so. Assistance with mobility and orientation on an ongoing basis, including assisting a child or children to access the school, the classroom, with accessing school transport or helping a child to avoid hazards in and around the school. Assisting teachers to provide supervision in the class, playground and school grounds at, for example, recreation, assembly, and dispersal times, when they're arriving or departing, and non-nursing care needs associated with specific medical conditions, such as, for example, children with frequent epileptic seizures, or for pupils who have fragile health, including where necessary and appropriate the administration of medicines. Care needs requiring frequent interventions include the withdrawal of pupil from a classroom where essential. This may be for the safety or personal care reasons, or where a child with a disability may be required to leave the class for medical reasons or due to distress on a frequent basis. Assistance with moving and lifting of children, operating hoists and equipment, and finally, assistance with severe communication difficulties, including enabling curriculum access for pupils with physical disabilities or sensory needs, and those with significant and identified social and emotional difficulties. And this might, for example, include assistance with assistive technology equipment, with typing or handwriting, supporting transition, assisting with supervision at recreation, dispersal times, etc. So that brings to an end, Chairperson, my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions members may have.